Okay, well, thanks for having me, Jesse, and thanks to the Terrebonne Parish Library. I'm just going to read a stack of poems here and just kind of go through them. I was going to start with a new poem. It's called How to Drown a Boy. Not with water, but with sweat. You work the boy until he cries. At the barn faucet, think of your own father. Cup your hands and tell the boy to look deep inside this well. Make him drink from your heavy hands. Make him drink until he swells. Make him taste the salt and split nails, cracked knuckles, bone, and blood. Tell him this blood is the life I have given, this blood the covenant, that you must always measure your life against mine. Now sneak him the whiskey behind the shed where his mother can't see. Show him that this is what a man has earned, and just a taste because he's only a boy with too much of his mother in him. A sip more, and he will learn. And if the sharpness of the steel leaves him weak, or the swing of the hammer wears him out, and if he squirms at the trigger pull to give the doe a chance to flee, then walk the boy down to the river and baptize him there with your own two hands. All right. That's a little taste of where this is going. A lot of fathers and sons coming up. I'll try not to harp on it too much. You don't realize how many of those poems you're writing until you put them all together in a book, and you're like, I might have some issues there. um, I don't know if you already knew this or not, but I live in Houston now. But before Houston, we lived in California for a few
Oh,
years.
wow, cool.
And while I was out there, I wrote a lot of poems thinking of home. I was very homesick. Um, and here is one. It's called The Gift at Duradon Station. And Duradon Station is just the train station that I took to get to work. The Gift at Duradon Station. And I met a man once at Duradon Station who asked me for a cigarette, and I seen he was a traveler, and I seen he had been lost. And I give him one, but won't let him pay. He offers twice, but I won't let him pay. And I heard in his voice the voice of home, and I seen in his face the face of my father. So I asked him where he was from, and he said a long ways off, 1,000 miles east. And I said, me too. And I said, whereabouts? He said, Kentucky. And I said, Louisiana. And we smoked together and talked ourselves back home for a while. And he told me what he's seen of the world. And he told me he ain't seen much of what it says in the good book. And I told him I met good people who ain't never even heard of Jesus. And I told him I met a woman who prayed, kneeling on grains of rice for hours until she couldn't walk. We all his children, they say. And they say Jesus did miracles at Cana in Galilee, but I was taught to fear the wine and reminded for the heavy hand. And they say when you have a house guest, treat him like family because he might be Jesus come to test us. And I think about Jesus knocking on that door, asking. As I left, I wished him luck on his journey, and as I was walking off, he called to me. Him pulling around in his pack for payment, and me knowing better than to refuse him again. And he pulls out a double-bladed Barlow knife, bent and mangled in stainless steel and been Lord knows where. And he holds it out in his hand like a sacrament, and I take it from his hand like it's the Lord's own flesh. I say it's too much. He might need it. He says, no, I got 100 of them. And I know he don't. But we both know this ritual. And anyways, a man can't be beholden to another man like it says in the book. True story. I thought he was going to stab me.
Oh, wow.
But he didn't.
We're very thankful for that.
I kept that knife. Yeah, so I went to California for my job, and being so far from home for a while really kind of gave me some perspective. And uh, I was thinking about my father, who's a pipe fitter and would work um, away from home, out of state for months at a time when I was growing up. So this poem's called Remembering My Father Who Went Off to Work. I think of my father, gone for months in the places he went for work, and though he said nothing much upon returning, the wonders our mother would tell us about the places he went. And I realize now that there wasn't much to tell of his trips, each place much the same to a pipe fitter, building Walmarts in small towns, the same as ours, pipelines that look the same except for maybe a difference in temperature or elevation, but sometimes how he would describe a bird we'd never seen, or snow, as strange to us as the moon, or sometimes that far off look he'd get, what I now understand to mean. I know now what you left there, Papa. Tobacco spit on churned earth, right of ways that stretch as far as a man's mind can stand until it breaks, and you heave out your guts and beer in an abandoned mall parking lot. Working shutdowns until every refinery looks the same and you lose your way in crawl spaces that stretch beneath entire rivers. The way mountains make you feel small at first, then less, until you pray for a flat, clear horizon to show you the way home. The faces of your sons you've forgotten 1,000 times in a bar in Topeka or Amarillo or Jackson. So when the local girl with a thing for roughnecks sidles up, you see in her face the faces you miss and you reach out for the life you left behind. I I usually read this poem later in the show. Um, there's a lot of father son stuff in my work, and a lot of times that can be kind of all rage and kind of all hurt. Um, but the older I get, the more forgiveness I think is coming out. And I usually read this one last or like later in the set, but I think I'll read it now. Um, I think I'll start with forgiveness first. It's called Benediction of the Father. Midnight, Father covered in blood, blood from the brow, the orbital bone, socket blinded, drunk with a broken hand. From the window, the marsh trembles. Two brothers, clay and soil thick as black bread, and tie vines gather and climb unchecked up the cinder block stilts and swallow the house. The eggplants in the garden are overripe, aubergine skins fit to burst, a bruise. Looking for work, hand wrapped in duct tape. Old classifieds cover the hole in the tile over the sink. What makes a task a chore? Long, slow warnings, a wasted life. The pages turn, the coffee boils down and spackles the decanter. We lost the house. He must have been letting things go for a long, long time. My father found a houseboat, said it's time to get back to the water, tried his hand at fishing for a living. The fish slaps the pier and falls still. Its mouth, all hook and blood, works the air, calling. A catfish so old and hardened it wouldn't even suffocate. After 3 shots, still, the fish continued to breathe. The houseboat sank the day we went back to school. Mama wouldn't say how. He built a house out of tin and plywood, borrowed tools and lumber from friends. After she left him, he burned the house. He was trying to teach me something. And what is the meaning of the broken hand? I ask my father, who is beyond the stars and cannot answer. I pass his words on to you. So of course I have a son now. I have two children, and like speaking of understanding and forgiveness, that'll do it every time. I have a son. I have a son who is almost 100% genetic clone of myself. So um, so I've learned a lot about myself through him. Um, and this is a poem with my son in it. It's called Fever. As a child, I caught a fever on a weekend stay with my father. Having no medicine nor the means to get any, he laid me down on a plywood floor and covered me with every blanket in the house. Said, "You must sweat the fever out." Days I lay there. The fever boiled my blood to rue. A winter night, and my only son is coughing. He pulls at his ears. I sit up with him all night. We rock and rock. I dreamed my father took me out on the boat, night air cooling me, water easing me to sleep. I dreamed he drowned me in the river. Not sure what that one means, honestly. There's some psychology there. I'm not 100% sure about. You put this on YouTube, maybe somebody just email. Um, it's kind of interesting as I got older. Me and my father reconnected, and it's kind of interesting now that our parents are getting older. How sometimes the tables turn in strange ways. And that's kind of what this next poem is about. Um, it's called The Incredulity of St. Thomas. I thought he had a heart attack, but watched him crawl into bed to sleep it off. The next morning he slept in, and I knew then for the first time that my father would forsake me and die. This was his final lesson. A body once feared could be broken. 30 years of labor was too short a time to do such damage, and my hands are unburdened and guilty, and this is the gift that he left to me. He rose after noon and tried to dress. I put my father back to bed and touched my finger to his ribs to make sure he was still there. Um, so one more of these type. This is another one with my son in it and parenthood. Um, it's called A Lesson. I'm trying to teach my son about anger, how it comes from me and mine from others, down the line and not his fault. I try to teach him how to calm himself, the way a doe's eyes show the fawn to lie down without rustling. How my father gave his anger to me, and how some days I pass it on, this inheritance. How when daddy said, "I'll teach you a lesson," how we'd scatter, how the birds would flit in the high branches, chatter at the shadow of a man under a wide pine ceiling. How I was just a stalk of a boy and lay down like marsh grass when he was near, a sack of rice in the shape of a boy when he was near, and how after a lifetime of hiding from him, how he keeps on my mind like this, how he is always showing up in my poems, like this poem and this poem and this poem. I can't promise he won't pop up anymore. That seemed like a good ending for the father poems, but he's kind of around. I'm going to switch gears a little bit. I thought since the timing of this reading, Christmas lights are going up everywhere, so I thought I'd read a Christmas poem. If that's kind of a Christmas poem. It's called Parable. When I am low and thinking darkly, there often comes to mind a moment from my childhood of two brothers about our own age, named Cain and Abel. Not the boys from the book, but the sons of a friend of my father's who invited us to stay one Christmas when we were down on our luck again. And how after we played all afternoon in the yard with an old foam football and ate together boiled shrimp with rice, we sat down to watch the boys open their presents. And I didn't realize until Abel opened his to find the same football, two chunks of foam torn by the dogs, how none of the toys were in packages, and many I had seen earlier in their room, and how I couldn't keep the shame from my face as I met Cain's eyes, and his look was a stone I have carried with me on some days as heavy as the way he placed his hand on his brother's shoulder. And oh God, how I can't find the lesson in all of this. Oh dear God of terrible mercies. I mean, I didn't say it was a fun Christmas poem, but it is a Christmas poem. One day, one day maybe I'll write a cheerful poem. I'm not sure that I can. Some people do it very, very well, and I'm envious. Um, I'll read another new one. I, it seems like not a very long time, but I suppose I have been back on the Gulf Coast now for a few years. But coming back to the Gulf Coast in the South um, was um, probably a really good thing for me. I'm still not in my home state, and I'm still very homesick, but I'm close enough to get a po' boy when I need one.
Mhm.
Um, so this is a new poem called "Over Countless Bridges, I Say Amen." Over countless bridges, I say amen, and the headlights are dim, and I am alone, but counting off the miles. In this place, everywhere and nowhere are home. The signs along the highway delight tourists with impossible pronunciations. Chapalaya, Chafunka, Chapatoulas, Maringouin, from the French for mosquito, and they ain't lying. Big as birds, the old women say. Chenier, pronounced differently, north of I-10. Whiskey Bay is where they dump the bodies, I tell a friend, once on a long drive over the basin, and her eyes light up in a way that has stuck with me all these years. Really? She asks. Really? They think the alligators will eat the evidence.
Mhm.
The slow tug and pull of the body will drag them out to more remote depths. But sometimes they find the bodies, I say. There really are better places to get rid of a body. And if you think about it, this place ain't even that remote. And I point out a gas station at the foot of the bridge, famous for keeping a live tiger in a cage near the diesel pumps. Plenty of better places, I say again, for what it is, what it ain't. That's These are my love letters to home. They may not be very lovely, but they are heartfelt. Um, okay, I'll just do one more then. And this one also is kind of about me being away from home. Um, Kind of about the strange ways your mind um, jumps from thought to thought, and how something unexpected can pop up in an unexpected place. Uh, I'm not sure I need to translate the title for you, Jesse, but this poem's called Teagallo. In winter, the horses canter slowly, and my metabolism grinds down to a crawl. Harder and harder to leave the bed, it seems, and harder still to remember where to be. Currently, a reading, not poetry, but nevertheless, lunch will be served. Crazy salad, spinach quiche, whole wheat rolls with butter, dessert bars. Walking in from the train station, I find myself excited by the thought of refilling my coffee at the post-reading buffet. Out of regular, I use the too sweet powdered sugar from the cupboard in the part of the cupboard where ingredients are kept, waiting to be mixed and otherwise useless. Each sip, the hint of king cake. I am thinking of Ashbury, and I sense his marble dust in the air around me. I am alone in this room of patient listeners. Day after day, I shuffle about and lose my concept of time. It blends together. I shift from room to room. I lose my sense of place, and the days all seem the same, but here and there, a friend, a brunch, a parade of smiles and nods. It's really wonderful to be here, to chat a bit. But through the droning, I find you. You are in a place I know you have never been. The bush tracks of the Cajun racing clubs, all but gone now in this modern age. And the dust that swirls around your feet ripe with clay and follicle. Your face lights at the ponies and the lithe men who ride them. They line up and wait to start. The gun startles me, and again I am in a room of people listening attentively. But can you hear the hooves, lost to sight around the bend, hidden behind the general store, the horse barns, T-Boy's dance hall? Can you hear their steps growing stronger, this event rounding the corner? Thanks very much.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. It's really nice being able to hear your writing. I don't think I've ever actually heard you. I've never had the pleasure of having heard you read before, so it was really great to hear that.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it.
I think we were about 4 or 5 days before traveling
Yeah,
when
yeah,
y'all canceled the festival. So
yeah. It
I
everything was so
was
crazy
coming to
around
read
that
for
time.
you. Yeah, I was on
Yeah.
my way.
You were, and we appreciate that. So it's good to still check in with you and to have that experience. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I really love a lot of the connected images that you use, and I think you had mentioned that before, and that's the one thing that I was going to say is like because well, I write fiction, so I know it's not quite the same as poetry, but obviously I feel like it's all relative in a lot of ways
Sure, sure.
as far as the techniques and the things that you use. So like I've noticed it in my own writing how I'm not like I guess planning to write about certain specific things, but when you go back to look at it, it almost feels like everything is connected. I don't know, like when you're talking about the father son element, is that something that you just kind of like found? Like, I don't know if you were like planning on having that. Like, is that like a thread? And what's kind of inspiring you to go there? I was just kind of, I don't know.
Well,
I don't know if that makes sense, but
yeah, no, of course. As I said, once you put a big stack of them together, it kind of looks like an obsession, but I'm not sure that it necessarily is for me, though I'm sure many people would disagree with that. Who've read a lot of my work. Um, it's really just more of uh, it's the thing in your life that you're dealing with, and that could be something different for everyone.
right.
When we see these kind of themes or topics pop up over and over and over again, as I said, especially when I had children, which was really kind of at the very beginning of my uh, poetry career, that fatherhood, boyhood kind of thing has just kind of always been on my mind. And I don't want to disparage anything or anybody, but um, you could go many different ways with childhood trauma, uh, poverty, abuse, whatever it is. You can go a lot of ways with it. And the older I've gotten, and the more I've wrote about those issues, the more I found that idea of forgiveness coming in. And I'd be lying if I didn't say that I understood um, more the things that I experienced as a child. I understood more as an adult. You know, that doesn't make them good or better
Right.
or whatever. But you just kind of understand more about it.
Yeah.
So that pops up from time to time. And then probably the newer one is homesickness.
Hmm.
That's been a thing for me lately. I'm perpetually homesick.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense. It's almost like the more you write about these things, the more in touch with them you get. So they inevitably kind of like start coming out, I guess. That makes sense.
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah, very
Sure,
cool.
I encourage my students to follow that trail.
Yeah,
Your
that
brain
makes
is
sense.
your brain is telling you something,
Yeah.
and sometimes it comes up good, sometimes it doesn't. But like, I try to look for the signs, not to be mystical or anything, but look for the signs that my brain is telling me when I'm composing something.
I like that. Yeah. It's kind of like going with your instinct on where you're going.
Yeah, I had no idea those horses were coming up in that last poem I read. It literally where my brain went in a reading. And I was thinking about Cajun bush racing. You know, I was homesick and would have given anything to be at a Cajun bush track. You know, um,
I love that.
yeah. So
So you just sit down and a memory comes to you and then you start writing?
usually, yeah, I usually um, something that I'll think about. Usually, it takes maybe a long time thinking. I was thinking about the Christmas poem I read. This isn't really a Christmas poem, but that incident um, throughout my growing up, throughout my adulthood, would pop into my head from time to time. So and I really didn't ever try to write about it. But I took that kind of memory,
Hmm.
which isn't always enough. I think just telling that story wasn't enough. It wasn't until I figured out how to tell it. Um, their names really were Cain and Abel. I didn't make that up. So like that was almost like the road laid out before me. You know, uh, take that story, combine it with my story, see where it goes, get the stone at the end, which was just a bit of luck. Um, so it starts with a memory, and then I try to add, um, add to it until it really kind of takes on itself, life for itself, which doesn't always work. You know, I have a folder full of failures in that regard.
So that was a true story? That was so sad.
Yeah, afraid so.
You know, sometimes, like you said, it's a memory, but
Hmm.
until you write it down, you can kind of almost release a little bit of it. Because I'm sure that had to plague you. That was so sad to see that. But to write it, it kind of helps. Does that help ease it from your brain?
Oh, sure. You know, it's got to. I mean, I'm sure a lot of psychologists and therapists have written about this phenomenon. You know, you kind of like, I mean, I think keeping it in is never a good idea.
Hmm.
Um, and if you're an artist of any kind, that gives people an outlet for those things. Um, art is made from pain, you know. I suspect it's probably always been that way, and it doesn't have to be, but oftentimes that's the impetus. There are great writers out there who take that pain and turn it into something joyful and beautiful, and I haven't quite been able to figure out how to do that. Um, but if you have it, you know, why not mine it?
Yeah, I think that's
Right.
oh, I'm sorry. I think
No,
that's
no, no.
an interesting concept because, again, pre-COVID, I was hosting a writer's workshop monthly here at the library, and that's something I would always tell them, and it's something I still feel very passionately about it, is like this concept that art and the beauty of art does come from suffering. So I feel like it's such a beautiful thing to channel that into something that's productive. And even if you're writing like a poem that might be like a sadder poem or a sad story, it's not necessarily joyful. It's still something of beauty, you know?
Yeah, and even, well, I have this, I subscribe to the idea of threat uh, in a work of art. The difference between a hotel painting and Picasso's Guernica.
Yeah.
There are differences, but it's not just painting, because you can write about beautiful things, you can write about happy things, but even underneath that, there probably is this idea that it can be lost, right?
Yeah.
So even if you're writing about a happy time
Mm-hmm.
or something beautiful, we know as humans that all can be lost.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that definition kind of holds up.
Yeah.
We make art because life is pain.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. I like that. I mean, it's how we cope with it, but it's also how we, I'm lost for the word, but one of the things I do, I'm PR, so I'm on Facebook a lot, and I've seen this graphic that had something regarding the recent pandemic and how so much of what we have is because of artists. When you're at home, when you're by yourself, when you're kind of in your own thoughts, you turn to movies, you turn to books, you turn to poetry. So it's coming out of pain, but it's also a way to soothe the pain of like being alone or coping with things or just having something to escape from or to enjoy. So I think we're just so lucky that we have that, and that we have artists like you who create these wonderful, you know, little pieces of art. It's crazy.
Yeah, just try living without art for a day.
Yeah.
Period.
I don't think we could. Do you have any, like, okay, I was thinking about Dr. Duce, who actually also tuned in to Zoom with us a few weeks ago, and he actually talked about controlled association as a method to, like, use things in your life, I guess, to create images. Like, do you have a process for anything? Like, or do you just jot things down, or is there, I don't know. Yeah.
Controlled association. I like that term.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, control. Yeah, it is a bit of a controlled association.
Yeah, like he would take things that he would see maybe like in like a newspaper or like a movie, and he would like think about these characters and almost make a list of like the words that were associated with this specific whatever he was looking at, whether it was like a newspaper story or something, and he would try to incorporate those specific words into the poem, I guess, as a way of like breathing life into it. So, and I had never heard of that before, and I thought it was really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what I uh, looked into, maybe with the stone in that parable poem. From the story, the stone is the weapon of damage, inflicting damage. Um, but the association would be the weight of it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the weight of Cain, who was the older brother,
Mm-hmm.
putting his hand on his brother's shoulder. Um, so this idea of weight, that's associative.
Yeah.
And there's no way that I thought of that as I was
Yeah.
writing it. I'd love to take credit for some of the things I look into. Um, but if you're lucky, and if you thought about your topic or your character or your lines or whatever you're doing, if you thought about it enough, the human brain can be quite amazing in how it associates
Yeah.
and what comes out. Um, and we can control it to a certain extent, right? We can extend metaphors, have conceits. We can move it in that direction, and still get magic sometimes. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that I put that much thought in it. Um, Sometimes it feels like luck, but it comes with, like anything, practice, I suppose.
Yeah. Cool. I feel like there was something I wanted to say and I forgot. Oh, is there not? Yeah, I don't know if Tammy has any other questions. I thought this was very helpful. Just chatting like this, I think for writers is so helpful because we
Oh yeah,
don't often get this, to kind of pick each other's brains.
kind of the thing that's missing with Zoom
Yeah,
and quarantine. Just talking shop. Uh,
yeah, yeah,
Unfortunately, a lot of us, are separated. We all live and work in different cities, and we don't get to see each other without readings and conferences and
yeah,
things like
yeah,
that. So
definitely.
it's definitely missing in my life,
Yeah,
for
for
sure.
sure.
Um, but anytime,
Have you always been attracted to poetry, or have you ever tried writing fiction?
never.
Never?
Poetry.
Oh my gosh, that's crazy. That's
Really,
awesome.
from the time I was, I don't know, 7 or 8, somewhere in there.
Very
Uh,
cool.
I read, of course, I've read a lot of fiction. I've taught fiction, and uh, but as a writer, when I get the time to write, or when I sit down, like the thing that I go to has always been poetry. And I've done my academic writing,
Yeah, yeah,
and I've done some like kind of creative nonfiction stuff, but fiction, no, not really. Aside from classwork,
yeah, yeah.
poetry, I knew pretty early on that poetry was the genre that I would focus on. Um, it interests me. Fiction is very hard.
Yeah.
I
There's a
know
lot
some
more
people,
moving parts to it, I
I
think.
know people can say that about poetry, and there has to be
Yeah,
maybe personality or whatever. For me, I was drawn to poetry from the beginning. Kind of fascinated me how they were put together. Um, it's like I don't know. It was like a intricate puzzle box for me as a child. And I grew up in a place where there wasn't a lot of reading and
mm,
no poetry in the house. My mother just took us to the library, um, rural Louisiana libraries throughout my growing up, which is why I'll always come to Terrebonne Parish whenever you invite me, as a way to uh,
definitely.
pay back what that has given me. I found it and I connected with it, and I kind of never got over it. I think my parents thought I would get over it, but I never got over it. So
Well, it's a good thing to have.
it's working out.
Yeah. I think that's cool because I was actually always the opposite. Like from an early age, I just loved writing stories. Like my parents bought me a typewriter when I was like 8. That was like my Christmas present, and that's how I learned how to type. And again, like I would write poetry like in school, like when I had classes and things like that. And I didn't not like it, but I was just never like drawn to it in the same way. And I don't know why that is.
Well, it's like I tell my students, like, would you do this anyway?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, I feel like your genre, and so many writers can write in multiple genres and write
Yeah.
brilliant in multiple genres. But like, poetry is the thing that I would do anyway.
Hmm.
If I didn't have this job, if I, you know, whatever, like, it's the thing I would do.
Yeah.
It's the thing you would do for free, right? Like, um, so that's kind of how I judge it and how I knew.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. It reminds me of Marty. I don't know if you remember Marty or if you met her. She's a children's writer from New Orleans who has been to our conference several times. And she had said something along the lines in her Zoom session that writing, it's hard work, but it's fun work. And if you're not having fun, then you're doing something wrong.
Like athletes, you have to fall in love
Yeah.
with practice.
Yeah.
The writing uh, is the 90% of the iceberg underneath.
Hmm.
The 10% is
Yeah.
reading and getting out there and being a writer in public. But like, if you don't love that 90%, uh, you'll never make it. So I use that athlete metaphor. You
Hmm.
fall in love with practice.
Yeah.
Games are great, but those those dudes who are professionals, they love practice.
Yeah.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
And poetry was always that for me. You know, it interested me to the point where, you know, I just
Mhm.
never let it go.
That's awesome. On the first day of the workshop that I hosted here, when it first started a few years ago, the first thing I did was write on the board, what makes you a writer or something like that. And it was so funny to me because I had all these different responses like, oh, you know, you need to publish, or you need to, you know, read a lot, you need to do this. And I literally wrote on the board, write. Like that's what you need to do to be writers, that you have to write. And I think it's
I
you
never
said,
think
like,
it.
yeah. Like being a writer, like it's one of those things. And again, I'm on social media, so I see a lot of memes about this, but you know, just it's so easy to procrastinate and to like not, I don't know if you ever feel that way too, like where you're just kind of in a slump, or if you have to like be actively writing every day, or how does that work for you? But I know it's a lot, the writers that I've worked with, we all kind of struggle with when you have a job and when you have kids, it's hard to maintain a steady routine of writing.
Yeah, that's something that me and my students talk about kind of nonstop.
Yeah. It's one of the
And
hardest parts, I think, is just steady routine.
I don't write every day. One of the benefits of writing poetry is I don't have like high word counts
Yeah.
and high word count deadlines to meet or whatever, you know. Um, that kind of writing, you know, I'm always in awe of novelists and people who do long form things. Um, and I'm friends with many of them, and I ask this question of most writers that I meet, you know, what's your process? You know, and the hours that they sit to do it, you know, it's impressive to me. Just out of a sheer need to get a word count, right?
Right, right.
I think that that kind of makes me lazy though, because I have written every day. You work on poems over and over and over. You do the grind. Um, Many poets I know sit down and write on a schedule every day. Um, it's harder for me to keep that schedule,
Mhm.
but I always remember a quote from some interview somewhere that I read when I was an undergrad from Charles Simic. Um, they asked him if he wrote every day, and he said, "I do something every day." And
Yeah.
that could be editing, that could be reading,
Mhm.
that could be talking to other writers, that
Yeah,
could be
absolutely.
revising. You know,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
when I'm stuck, I go back to my poems that are no good, and I look at them and see if anything can be salvaged.
yeah.
Like,
That's
I'll play with
it's
them.
interesting you say that, because that's one thing we talked a lot about too in my group, is like the fact that sometimes even if you're not actively writing, sometimes part of the process is the not writing, especially when you're doing something that has a longer form. Like I know, and this is almost embarrassing to say, but there are days where like I will sit down for hours and like write like 2 sentences because it takes me that long to get them the way that I want them. And sometimes it's part of just planning and thinking and kind of feeling out the inspiration instead of just actually physically writing. That's the hardest part, is doing the actual writing and the actual work.
Staying in the chair.
Yeah, yeah.
But the good thing about writers, in a way, as opposed to maybe other art forms that require different equipment or something like that, is that we can think about our story or
Yeah.
wherever we're at. And I do think cook time is important. It's hard
Mhm.
to quantify um, what that time spent thinking before the writing process begins is, and a lot of writers have written on that.
Yeah.
But I've noticed that a lot of young writers, students of mine, will beat themselves up over not writing when what they're really doing is um, cooking it, you
Mhm.
know, in their
Yeah.
head every day, you know.
Yeah.
And when it's ready, it will come out.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So I try to tell them that and keep them keep them in it.
I really like this idea of like doing something every day. I feel like that motivates me because again, as writers and as artists, I think we put a lot of pressure on ourselves, you know, where we're not getting it done, so to speak, but just doing something like in the creative process. You know, I like that a lot. I think that's very helpful.
It's the thing that keeps me going anyway. And um, writing is a job.
Mm.
It is my job. Writing, editing, teaching, all of those things are in the same ballpark. So I kind of have this kind of mantra, if you will, over the years of just like stay in the game. You
Yeah.
know, keep at it, keep doing something, stay busy, stay in the writing life, um, as much as I can with the circumstances going on in my life.
Right.
And you'll look up one day and realize you've strung together a career, and that's kind of what I want, is to stay in the game, um, until it's done.
That's awesome. One other thing I want to say, I know we're actually kind of coming up on time here, but I know you have your folder of failures, which I think is funny. And it's funny because, and Tammy, I don't know if this is something that's going to help you, which is why I wanted to mention it. I kind of have something similar. I've never really thought about it before, but like, I am not an organized person. I have like ADHD brain, and like I'm all over the place all the time. So like my organizational process is very much attuned to me. So like I just have files, unnamed documents on my computer, like random things written like everywhere. But something, especially as a fiction writer, and I'm sure you've heard it too, is like the kill your darlings aspect of like throwing out what you don't need, even if you really want to keep it in. And that's kind of what I've done too, is like I just have like random folders where it might just have like a sentence or like a name of a character or like little images that maybe I've had to cut, but I keep them. And I actually recycle a lot of that, and I use it later on. Like it might not work for this piece, but maybe it'll work for something else. I don't know if you've ever had that experience, but like I kind of keep a little of everything, in the same way.
Yeah, I know plenty of writers who keep every draft in like numbered sequences as they change their poems or whatever. I don't do it exactly that way,
Yeah.
but I was lucky enough to study with Louise Glick, and she told me something once that I'll never forget. I mean, it was kind of brilliant, that in that folder of bad poems, the ones, I actually named that folder "Delete Before You Die."
Oh, I love that.
But she said, I bet if you go through there, the poem didn't work, but I bet you there's a line in there, right? There's a
Yeah.
scene
Yeah.
that caused you to write it, or there's something in there, there's a spark in there
Mm-hmm.
that I bet you can pull out and use. And I, ever since, have taken that advice, which has also turned into good advice for writer's block. As I said, if nothing's really coming, then I will go dig
Yeah.
around in there. And sometimes a line or an idea will spark a better poem,
Yeah.
than I wrote 6 years ago.
Yeah.
Now I might be more ready to write that, or something like that. So that was good advice that I try to pass on as much as possible. It really, really helped me.
I think that kind of goes with the doing something every day aspect too, because even if you write something, like you write like a page or like a poem that just feels like it's not working, like there's still probably something salvageable, even if it's just the idea of this poem. So it's like, it's not for
Yeah,
nothing,
no, I did. I went home that day, and I looked, and every poem I looked in had a line, or
Hmm.
like an image,
Yeah.
or just something that I thought, okay, that's what I was interested in. This poem failed, but like I can take that
Hmm.
and try again, and that has been very, very fruitful advice for me.
Definitely. I like that. It's very motivational.
Yeah,
Sure. Well, thank you so much. This was it was a really good talk.
yeah. Thanks for having me.
Thank
Always,
you so
always good.
much. All right, y'all take care. Bye bye.